Welcome to Spin Rack, everybody. Today we're going to be discussing Marie Severin, one of the giants of the comic book industry who's recently passed. Petey, give us a heads up what you think about this, about her contributions to the art of comic books in Marvel and other stuff.
Well, it was sad to hear that she passed. She definitely a long-standing Marvel creator. She was mostly did a lot of stuff behind the scenes. So a lot of the art direction, because Stan was also more of the art director, even though he would tell the artist what he wanted, and as far as covers, he had different ideas. Say, oh, I want this character bigger, I want these characters smaller. Can you redo it? I want the characters looking to camera, that sort of thing. And Marie is one of the first that sort of knew what Stan wanted and would implement it. And because they say Kirby didn't always. He didn't always keep the costumes consistent, so there was always art correction work to do at Marvel. So then at some point, Marie went to doing, but before that, she worked at EC Comics. EC Comics also did some of the greatest comics, but at the same time, they came up under the most heat. But she was one of the colorists there. They sort of felt that she was sort of their moral guide, because then they would go too far. She would sort of mute the colors and help them out. She didn't necessarily change. She said, I didn't change anything and I didn't have any power over them, but I would try to mute some things with color. So she started off as a colorist, but then she was also a cartoonist because she'd do little gag things about all the EC creators. But then when she moved to Marvel, she not only did art correction, color, they found, she can also draw superheroes, do the same dynamics as John Romita or John Buscema. You also had, someone who could do comedy. So she would make fun of the people in the Marvel office, and she would do, spoof the Marvel characters. So after a long stance of being in the office and helping, Marvel, she also moved to the cartoon and stuff like that. So she just had a very long career, a very strong creator, and it's sad to hear that she's gone.
So, Kat, what are some of the comics that she was involved in as a colorist, artist, and illustrator?
My introduction to Severin was on Kull the Conqueror. I'm a big time Conan fan, and Conan the Barbarian. If you're a big fan like me, Conan's actually coming back to Marvel. Just a little side note right there. But I'm a big fan of Conan, which also introduced me to Kull and some other Robert E. Howard stories. So the first introduction I had to her art was on that. Now, what Barry Windsor Smith was to the Conan stories, this is what Marie Severin was to the Kull stories. Kull's world of Lucia is this great kingdom, but it's decaying ever so slightly. So the luster is, the bloom is off the rose, but it's still this magnificent place to look at for us. It's just not what it once was. It's a hackneyed phrase, but that's how she drew it, where everything was still grand and still majestic, but just not with that quite shine that you would expect from a place of this nature. Her Kull is not Conan either. Her Kull is taller, more athletic, if you will. Okay, leaner in muscle. And a king who wears his crown very, very heavily. And then, of course, with Brule, the spear slayer, who's the only person he can trust in any of these stories, because from start to finish, Kull's throne is consistently tried to be usurped. But her display of Kull, because Kull has a consistent scar on his face, he has to actually sit. There's one story where she ends it where he's sitting in contemplation of what the future may actually come for. And you could literally just blow that up, and put it on your wall like Rodin's Thinker, if you will, at the end of the day. It was very majestic, okay? And at the same time, it was like a real meat and potatoes type of artwork too, because you still had to come over there and do the comic stuff. You had to do the action, the fighting, but then everything else that would come in. Windsor Smith's art on Conan always sold with people because he brought in all the fantastic elements of coming into Conan's world. Severin, on the other hand, was able to display that same world, but this is still almost literally, Kull lives like a good 1,000 years before Conan does. And the world, while they're the same, they're still different. And she goes into it with a style that makes it, I don't want to say unique, but she really made it breathe, as opposed to, especially if you read the story, she made it breathe in comparison to what you would have read off the page. It was excellent art. Excellent art when we come over to it. Very I mean, literally, sometimes they looked like they were just chipped out of stone, colored, and breathed into, and they were actually given life. So it was really good when she did that. She had a very fine hand for that. And the only other story, the only other one that I actually remember very well is her. She's a co-creator for Spider-Woman. Okay, which I don't know. A lot of times they'll say, comics are, boys' club, this type of stuff, which I thought she just proved a lot. I will say that comics is a boys' club, but you have to be able to rock with the boys. And if you can't rock with the boys, then, that's just pretty much it at the end of the day. She was someone who had no problem rocking with the boys on just about every level that you could imagine, in terms of story writing, character creating, art directing, okay, comedy, skits, strips. She was able to have a hand in and do it all. And I'm not saying that she didn't, I'm not saying nobody gave her guff or anything of that nature, but, again, this is the club. If you're going to be in it, this is the things that you're going to have to bring to the table in order to do stuff. And it wasn't like everybody didn't get guff. Everybody did at some particular point. What's the last one, I think? I don't know. She did some. I can't remember the issues. I know she did some work on Weird Science. I just bought some issues the other day. I know she did some work on Weird Science, which was never a really big. It was never a really big draw of mine, except for this one particular issue that I went to go get, simply because I always just like the spook factor for it. At the end of the day, Weird Science it's more horror at the end of the day than anything else. But again, it's a testament to the talents that she has. And I'm such a big fan of her. I'm such a big fan of her work in terms of her art for things that were not superheroes. Because I didn't read a lot of. She wasn't doing any superhero stuff even though Spider-Woman is her co-creation. She wasn't doing the art chores on that. Okay, at least not the books that I read. But definitely Cull, Weird Science, the strips and such. Just I don't know. I mean, for me, she's kind of like the Robert Crumb of Marvel in terms of what she was doing and in terms of the quality and the overall texture that she was bringing to the artwork, and then the sensibility and the humor, okay, and the intelligence of the writing that went along with it.
Petey, what are some of the more known comic that she worked on?
Well, it's the thing with comics that whatever, there's nothing is remembered in history. So obviously a book like Not Brand X was one of her things that she had regularly drawing. So she did a lot of spoofs in there, the Marvel characters. But as a kid, I used to read Crazy, which is an offshoot of Mad, and she also did Teen Hulk in there. Now Teen Hulk was also done by a lot of other people, but the first few stories was done by Marie, and that was always something I would always look for in Crazy, like to get the Teen Hulk, because it was also sort of continuing stories in there. But one of the things that I think going to the Boys Club in Marvel, because there's an article in Rolling Stone called Face Front Readers, which has supposed to be the redo expose on Marvel after the Herald Tribune kind of sort of broke up Stan and Kirby. They had an insider, her name was Robin Green, went through the Marvel, went to the Marvel bullpen and was talking with all the people that she knew. She knew Stan, she knew Herb Trimpe, she knew Marie, she knew Flo Steinberg. And it was interesting of them talking about going around the office and, guys being guys and having pictures of girls in their areas and stuff like that. And at the same time, Marie slightly talks about, doing, sometimes guys might be something like this, but then she hinted that she'd have something that she would do back. So she would, in this book right here, she did a lot of spoofs on a lot of the Marvel creators like Roy Thomas, John Romita. She'd do a little drawings, like most of the artists kept, because like Don McGregor, who was the Black Panther, he was an assistant editor at one point, and there's just drawings after drawings that.
She drew like a baby or something?
Yeah, like he was a spoiled brat. And he kept all of them. So it's like tons of these things of her battles with Don McGregor. And there's a classic Spider-Man picture where Spider-Man's holding his head. And John Romita drew this, and he was like, he was like, I did it. This is like the quintessential Spider-Man piece. And then she took a stat of it. She colored the costume, the regular costume. She took the head and colored it orange, and she was like, headless Spider-Man with an orange. He was like, oh my God. And Herb Trimpe actually kept all of his, like he had all of his, and it's in his artist edition, because there's a picture where like Marie sort of captured how the women were reacting to Herb Trimpe in there, because I guess he has these dark eyes and he's like real tall. So there's a picture where she's on top kissing Roy Thomas's wife is, hey, is Herb in? And like, who's that? Saul Brodsky's niece has got her behind next to him. And then Barry Windsor Smith's girlfriend is underneath saying, you know, tell Barry I'm not here. And then underneath it says, Barry's girlfriend for the time. 'Cause like obviously he's going through, you know, girlfriends like water. And then there's also, I think, Glynis Oliver at that point. She's also in the drawing. So she always had these little drawings, which I didn't know until recently when you buy these things like Alter Ego, and they put out a bunch of those. And I think that really would capture what the Marvel bullpen was like, because you could almost animate that stuff. Because I think, who's it? They also said she was very tough on Stan Lee's brother, because he was always in the office. Because they said at one point Larry Lieber had a back problem, and like she has a sign like she hits Larry on the back, hey, Larry's back. So that sort of thing. But that sort of being able to give and take, and being as strong a creator as John Buscema. I mean, as far as doing monthly comics and John Romita and all those
Make
guys.
that other point, because some people will say, well, why wasn't she on a book, you know, regularly? And they kept pulling her off because she was good with, you know, she was good with the production elements, very good with the production elements.
If also the thing is, like, she did the Hulk. She did who else did she do? She only did like a couple issues of Iron Man, but she did Doctor Strange, with some of my favorite stuff of hers, because I saw that in the Origin of Marvel Comics. And you had this incredible Ditko issue, and then you have what looks like the rings they use in the movie. Like she did this where the Ancient One is just wrapping up Doctor Strange and these things, and he's in this weird position. And it's just like, I was like, is his mentor going to kill him? Because it looks so dark. So the only thing that didn't happen was that she have a hit book. So, because she did the Submariner, she did the Hulk, as I said, and and she did Doctor Strange, and these were like a good 10 to 20 issue runs. But if they had, if the numbers had moved up, then, but I think also Stan probably didn't want the numbers to move up, because she could pull her and have her do fill-ins, do covers, correct Kirby stuff, and she was just in the office. She was always, she'd been at Marvel as long as John Romita. Like Stan had went to...
Stan was there before it was Marvel.
Yeah,
So,
but by the 70s, he'd show up in the office like maybe a couple hours a day, maybe 3 days a week. She's in office from when she started after EC. She lost her job at EC and went to Marvel. She's there until the 90s, when a lot of people either retired or like her and John Romita's wife were there the longest. So it's like she always had, and then I like the fact that she got to do the cartoon, and she see her production stills, which are not comedy, but then she did a joke panel where she has all the Marvel characters running to attack her, and she's like, say cheese. So it's just a strong talent, a strong cartoonist, and but if she had if the Hulk had hit and done numbers the same, like really it jumped, the needle had jumped the same way I say, like, because obviously, like, if you look at what's that thing, Conan, because you were saying like Barry Windsor Smith was an incredible artist, and then John Buscema comes on there, the Conan book is doing great, then the numbers go up even more, they're like, okay, this is what it is. Or same with the John Buscema on the Fantastic Four, John Romita on that. If she had a title that sort of really jumped, then Stan would have been in the in a point where it's like, oh no, I'm losing Marie when I could use her on all this other stuff. So if had the Hulk really jumped, I think because in that Rolling Stones article that I mentioned, Herb Trimpe is the cover. So the Hulk numbers, when he took over after Marie, possibly were doing very strongly. So had she had a title that really, went bananas, then Marvel would have to really struggle with the decision to say, all right, you're doing this. And then if they really gave her a character that she created, to say, all right, what kind of character do you want to do? So
okay, well, that's great informative. Well, thank you everybody for watching this information about Marie Severin. one of the greats that's passed away.
And check out this book. It's incredible. It's got a lot of the comic creators, some of them who's passed by now, like Herb Trimpe, he's interviewed in this book. But, you know, and every story that I just told outside of the Don McGregor story was in Alter Ego. But this is from the same company, Tomorrow's Productions, which does some great books. So, and it's some spoofs. There's a spoof of herself. That's the other thing that John Romita said. Not only was she spoofing the Marvel, you know, the Marvel bullpen, she also spoofed herself. So,
Spinner Rack.